And somehow we've become very narcissistic, and it's become just whatever behavior we want to engage in, regardless of how it impacts the people around us in a restaurant. And I was so glad when they left. And I think Dad finally whisked him out of there because he recognized that this was disruptive. So this is kind of riding in the back of my head Saturday when I go to Barnes & Noble, because you know, they say as you move towards unity with God, your ego falls away. Well, my ego took a big hit because I had to go get a magnifier to read some of my Bibles. Because some of them, the print isn't so big, and it was hard for me to do this. But I went there, and so I had a couple of them, and all of a sudden I got really hungry, and I sat down in the cafe to have a sandwich. And at the table next to me there was a man with about 7 children, and I'm kind of bad at guessing this, but I would say they were between 9 and 12. And there were a pile of children's books on the tables, and he was teaching them. Well, I should say they were giving him book reports on what they read. He was obviously tutoring them in reading. He was equipping them for what they needed to do to succeed in life on a Saturday morning, on his own time. And when, you know, they got a little rowdy, he just said to them, you need to pay attention, and called them back into a place where they could engage. And afterwards I went up to him and I said, because I was just blown away, I was so impressed. I said, you know, I know that you know how important the work you're doing is, but I want to tell you how much I appreciate that. And I gave him my card, and I said, if we at Love of God can help you in any way, please let us know. This is you know, we want to support this. And he introduced himself. His name was Deacon Mills, from a church somewhere in Milwaukee. And so here's the church actually engaging. So what's the difference? And what's the difference in light of the fact that we're called to live lives that transform us into people of Christ? The difference is, on Friday night at the Chinese restaurant, we think we have everything we need. We think that we're okay. We think that there's no progress that needs to be made because we've misunderstood the notion that we're all okay. It's true that we're all okay. But it's not true that everything goes well for us. It's not true that any of us know everything we need to know. And when you get into scriptural passages that talk about things like the wisdom from above being pure, then peaceable, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, without inconsistency or insincerity, it takes work to get there. We just don't wake up one morning and say, I believe in Jesus, and all that stuff comes. But it comes as we live a life that moves us towards that Christ Enlightenment notion. It's that kind of thought that gets us into worrying about who's the most important one here. It's that kind of thing that moves us into being, quite frankly, the kind of person mentioned in wisdom, who says, here comes Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. Let's sit here and hope something bad happens to Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. We'll see how good he really is. Jesus picks up the child and puts it, it says him, and that bothers me. It could just as well have been a little girl. So let's say Jesus picks up the child and puts her in front of him. Children in his culture were regarded as refuse. Children were not useful until they got old enough to work. And they weren't really useful unless they were firstborn males. So Jesus picks up the symbol, or the reality actually, of the one who is ignored and thought not to have value, and said, you must become like this child. You must be willing to take the place of the one who isn't valued. And I'd suggest to you that Deacon Mills on Saturday morning in Barnes & Noble understands that. He's doing real and effective ministry. He's lifting up the lowly. And you know what? It's pretty simple. I mean, it's easy to get into that place where we think this is a big, huge deal and, oh, I could never do that. And yet, as I was looking for books to test out my magnifier, a man came down the aisle at Barnes & Noble who was obviously homeless. He said he had a drink, soda or something with him, and he said, excuse me, obviously feeling like he was out of place. And I said, no, I said, excuse me. And I said, how are you today? I don't know why I said it. I'm not setting myself up as goody two-shoes, but it just kind of came out. And he looked so shocked that somebody would ask. He was trying to scurry past, and he stopped, and he turned around, and he said, you know, I'm doing okay. How are you? We can engage people in a meaningful way without vast sums of money, without traveling anywhere, just in the course of our daily lives. If only we're willing, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it by any means, but if only we're willing to try and keep our eyes open. You know, enlightenment is that notion of seeing, of the light bulb going on. And if we keep our eyes open and look for those opportunities to take the one who is regarded as being of less value or of little value and validate them just as simply as saying, how are you? You know, I'm glad you're here. You are not an inconvenience to me. We do what Jesus did in picking up that child. And when we do that, it doesn't matter if there's any meatballs in the damn buffet. Because we look at the world in a different way. And it becomes not about what we can get, what we ask for and don't receive because we're asking with the wrong motive, but it becomes about what we can give. And the part about that people don't talk about is that it doesn't end there. Life becomes a happier place when we see that we make a difference in the lives of other people. And that we don't need tens of thousands of dollars to do it. We don't even need $1 to do it. That we don't need an elaborate ministry plan. We don't need a lot of committees. We can just say, I'm going to find one person today, and I'm going to say hi to them. And I'm going to try and pick the person who probably a whole lot of people aren't saying hello to. Every time you do it, you pick up the child. Every time you do it, you don't worry about whether you're first or last. You worry about what really matters. And that's moving into that union with Christ and that union with God that is the purpose of our walk as a Christian people.